Today we're on part 3 of your object self-portrait project. Here is our timeline. Today, your goal needs to be to finish your rough draft because your rough draft shouldn't take you that long. Today, you want to start the final paper. You will have today, tomorrow, the next day, the next day, the next day, the day after that, and the day after that, the day after that, the day after that to work on this. It is due on the 18th. If you are taking forever to work on your rough draft, then speed yourself up. Remember that the rough draft isn't the paper that needs to be super detailed. This one can be pretty simple. Mine are pretty detailed. Yours do not have to be as detailed as these. It can be basically be like blocks of shapes, just explaining where your objects are going to go. We started this project with a list of ideas, and then we moved on to working on your rough draft. So I came up with 3 completely different designs using my same list of ideas for my rough drafts, and I'm ready to move on to the final paper. The rough draft was on, these are just printer paper, and I decided that I'm going to stick with this design. So this design here is pretty simple. I actually outlined it with Sharpie on this paper, and so on the final paper, which is the 18 by 12 paper, the same one that we used for the narrative drawing and for the watercolor drawing, I drew out my design again. You can see I started with pencil. You see my pencil lines? I started really light, and I actually made a lot of changes as I was drawing. You can see that I ended up adding a whole nother object in here because I had some space. So I put a flower pot with a plant in it. And that's not on my original rough draft. So your rough draft is how you came up with where you were going to place things. But as you move on to the final, if you make decisions to edit, that's a good thing. And so edit if you need to. What I'm working on now is going over all of my lines with Sharpie. And you don't have to outline yours. Just depends on what materials you're using. If you're using watercolor, make sure that if you are doing any kind of outlining that you experiment first with whatever your pen or marker is that you're using, because a lot of pens and markers will mix with the paints and they'll bleed. And if you don't want that to happen, you may want to use something permanent like a Sharpie. But I'm going to keep outlining mine. You go work on yours.